This video explains how to diagnose a load cell problem. There is a load cell under each corner of the LFC biodigester, and the load cells are numbered 1 to 4. The software continually reads the weight reported by each load cell to calculate the weight of the waste in the drum. The values shown in the diagnostic screen are the real-time values. On the touchscreen, select Status, Diagnostics. If the slot shows low, you need to adjust the load cell balance evenly amongst the feet. You can find the steps later in this video. If the load cell shows excess, you also need to adjust the load cell balance. It could also be caused by the floor on which the LFC biodigester stands is uneven, so that one or more foot is taking too much weight. If the load cell shows read, this indicates a fault of the hardware inside of the controller box. You may be able to clear this error by cycling power on the LFC biodigester. If the error returns, contact your authorized distributor for replace the PC board. If the load cell shows 9999, it could be one of the following reasons: the LFC biodigester has not been calibrated, or a failure of the PC board, or a load cell has been ignored. Check the user's manual how to unselect ignore function. If the load cell reads a negative number, it means the most recent calibration of the LFC biodigester was when the machine was not empty of waste food or something was resting on the LFC biodigester when it was calibrated. Recalibrate the LFC biodigester. If load cell shows error or failed, we need to determine if the load cell board has failed or a load cell has failed. Here is how. Disconnect the LFC biodigester from the AC power supply. Remove the front panel from the LFC biodigester. This may be tight, in which case you may need to lift the panel while you undo the screws. You can do this with a car jack or a J-bar. There are 4 screws, 2 at the top and 2 at the bottom. Open the control box. There is a key mounted on the chassis. Unplug the connector for the bad load cell. Unplug the connector for a good load cell. Swap the 2 load cell connectors and push them into the PC board. Close the control box door. Power back on the LFC biodigester. See if the error has switched load cell slots. If the error code has remained at the same slot, the PC board has failed. You need to contact your distributor to get the board replaced. If the error has moved to the new load cell slot, this indicates the load cell has failed. You need to get it replaced. Restore each load cell cable back to its original position. Here are the steps to replace a load cell. Unplug the LFC biodigester. Remove front and rear panels. You also need to remove right side panel if replacing either load cell 1 or 2. You also need to remove left side panel if replacing either load cell 3 or 4. Unplug the connector for the appropriate load cell from the load cell board. Remove the connector from the end of the cable. Before you remove the old load cell, connect the new load cell to the load cell board. Connect the power to the LFC biodigester and verify that the new load cell does not indicate the same problem on the diagnostic screen that the old load cell indicated. Disconnect the AC power from the LFC biodigester and disconnect the new load cell. Loosen the cable gland that holds the cable for the old load cell in place as it passes through the control box, then pass the cable out through the cable gland. Lift the LFC biodigester evenly and keep it level. Support it well. Loosen the cable gland that holds the cable for the old load cell in place as it passes through the control box, then pass the cable out through the cable gland. Remove the foot on the load cell. Unscrew the 2 bolts holding the load cell. Retain the spacer that fits between the load cell and the chassis. Install the new load cell with the arrow on the end of the load cell pointing down. Fit the spacer between the load cell and the chassis. Tighten the bolts by hand. Tighten the bolts that hold the load cell to 65 Nm, 48 foot-pound. Install the foot on the load cell, screwing it up completely. The bolt on the foot will fit through the mounting plate on the bottom of the chassis. Adjust the load cell so the bolt of the foot is in the center of that hole. Feed the cable through the cable glands and tighten them to hand tight. Do not cut the length of the cable, but instead wrap the excess cable at the bottom of the LFC biodigester. Lower the LFC biodigester so the center of each foot on each load cell is in the center of the rubber pads. Place the connector on end of the cable. Plug the connector into the load cell board. You can find the slot number printed on the board. Close the door to the control box. Lower the feet of the LFC biodigester onto the mounting blocks. Connect AC power to the LFC biodigester. On the touchscreen, select Status, Diagnostics. Adjust the foot that has the lowest reading displayed on the screen until it is equal to the next lowest reading. Use a 19mm wrench to adjust the feet. Tighten the upper lock nuts. You can calibrate the LFC biodigester only if the LFC biodigester is empty of waste food. Otherwise, leave it with previous calibration. Ensure no object is on the LFC biodigester. Do not lean on the LFC biodigester. On the touchscreen, select Setup, Calibrate Empty Weight. If the load cell you just installed reads 0 or another error, check the following. There is no foot on the load cell. There is a foot, but it is not touching the mounting block. The load cell has been installed upside down. The arrow must point down. The load cell has not been installed correctly, so the thread of the foot is pushing against the chassis. The spacer was not installed between the load cell and the chassis. The load cell bolts were not done up tight enough, so the load cell has moved and is resting against the chassis. The wires for the load cell are not properly terminated at the connector. The connector is not properly mated on the PC board. If there are no errors, restore all the sides of the panels. If you still have any questions, please contact your authorized distributor or Power Knot.